Welcome to our channel. A channel that unveils century histories, where we explore the stories, events, and people that shaped centuries and still influence our world today. This episode unfolds carefully. Stay with it to the end. America wasn't built only by freedom, courage, and opportunity. It was shaped by forgotten voices, erased stories, quiet resistance, and choices that never made it into textbooks. Some truths were hidden to protect a national myth. Others were ignored because they were uncomfortable. Tonight, you're about to hear the America most people were never taught. Before we begin, if you value history explained clearly, responsibly, and without distortion, subscribe to this channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. Because every untold story helps us understand the world we live in today. This is a history we think we know. America is often described as a nation born in freedom. A bold experiment that broke away from empire and built a new world from scratch. It's a story repeated in classrooms, speeches, films, and holidays. A story of brave founders, daring revolutions, and endless opportunity. But that story is incomplete. The United States was not simply discovered, founded, or destined. It was negotiated, resisted, contested, and constantly redefined. Behind every familiar moment lies a deeper truth. One rarely discussed, simplified, or quietly left out. This is not a story meant to diminish America. It is a story meant to understand it. Because history doesn't weaken a nation. Ignorance does. And the untold history of America is not hidden because it doesn't matter. It's hidden because it does. Long before European ships touched its shores, North America was already alive. Not empty. Not unexplored. Not waiting. Millions of people lived across the continent. From the Arctic to the deserts, forests to coastlines. They built cities long before skyscrapers. Trade networks long before railroads. Governments long before constitutions. Some nations practiced advanced agriculture, cultivating corn, beans, and squash with techniques still studied today. Others mastered astronomy, mapping the sky with precision that rivaled Europe's best scientists. Many developed complex diplomatic systems, resolving conflict through councils, negotiation, and tradition. These societies were not frozen in time. They evolved. They adapted. They thrived. This land was not empty. It was not unused. It was not free for the taking. Yet when Europeans arrived, they brought a powerful belief. That land not ruled their way was land without ownership. That belief changed everything. It justified displacement. It justified conquest. It justified violence wrapped in language like civilization and progress. And it became the foundation of American expansion. The untold truth is this. America did not rise on untouched land. It rose on land already lived on, fought for, and defended. European arrival is often framed as discovery. But discovery depends on perspective. To the people already living there, it was invasion. Early encounters were not immediately violent. There were moments of cooperation, trade, and curiosity. But beneath those moments lay imbalance. Europeans brought diseases no one here had immunity against. Entire communities were devastated before they ever saw a musket or a sword. Smallpox alone erased generations. Villages disappeared. Languages vanished. Knowledge was lost forever. This wasn't warfare. It was biological catastrophe. And it reshaped the continent before borders were ever drawn. As European colonies expanded, they spoke of opportunity and faith. But survival demanded labor. And labor demanded control. Indentured servants worked brutal years for passage across the ocean. Enslaved Africans were forced into permanent bondage. From the beginning, American prosperity was unevenly distributed. Freedom existed. But it had conditions. Land ownership mattered. Race mattered. Gender mattered. The seeds of contradiction were planted early. America would grow. But never evenly. The American Revolution is often portrayed as a united people rising together against tyranny. In reality, the colonies were deeply divided. Roughly 1/3 supported independence. 1/3 remained loyal to Britain. 1/3 tried to survive without choosing a side. Families were torn apart. Neighbors turned on one another. For enslaved people, the revolution was not about liberty. It was about survival. Some supported the colonists who spoke of freedom while denying their humanity. Others sided with the British, who promised freedom but often failed to deliver it. Native nations were pulled into a war that wasn't theirs, forced to choose alliances based on which side posed the lesser threat. When independence was won, celebration followed. But unity did not. The new nation was born in contradiction, declaring liberty while practicing exclusion. The Constitution is celebrated as a triumph of democracy. And it was. For some. To keep the fragile union together, compromises were made. Enslaved people were counted, but not as full human beings. Women were excluded entirely from political power. Voting depended on property, wealth, and status. The founders knew these contradictions existed. Some believed they would resolve themselves over time. Others chose stability over justice. The result was a nation founded on ideals it could not yet fully honor. As the young nation grew, so did its hunger for land. Expansion was framed as destiny, as progress, as inevitable. But expansion was not peaceful. Treaties were signed, then broken. Promises were made, then ignored. Entire communities were forced from ancestral lands. Relocation was often justified as necessary, sometimes described as humane. In reality, it was devastating. Families were marched across unfamiliar terrain. Thousands died along the way. Cultures were fractured. Histories were erased. This was not a side effect of growth. It was policy. The idea that America was destined to expand coast to coast became a powerful national belief. It fueled settlement. It fueled ambition. It fueled violence. Those who benefited called it opportunity. Those who suffered called it loss. Both were true. As new states entered the Union, a dangerous question followed them. Would they permit forced labor? Or reject it? That question fractured the nation. Compromises delayed conflict. They did not solve it. Each new territory reopened the debate. Each decision deepened mistrust. Politics became bitter. Language became violent. The nation was growing faster than its ability to remain united. Something had to break. By the 1860s, the United States stood at a crossroads. Its ideals were clear. Its contradictions were exposed. Its unity was fragile. What followed would test the nation like nothing before. States would separate. Families would divide. The meaning of freedom itself would be rewritten in blood. And when the smoke cleared, America would survive, but never be the same. By the early 1860s, the United States stood at a breaking point. For decades, the nation had postponed the inevitable. Compromises were passed. Laws were negotiated. Language was softened. But the core conflict never disappeared. America could not continue calling itself a land of liberty, while allowing millions to live without freedom. When Abraham Lincoln was elected president, Southern states saw the future closing in. They feared loss of power, loss of control, loss of a system that had defined their economy and identity. So they chose separation. One by one, states declared they were leaving the Union. And just like that, the American experiment faced its greatest internal crisis. The Civil War is sometimes framed as a tragic misunderstanding. It was not. It was the result of decades of unresolved contradictions. Political arguments turned into military strategy. Moral debates turned into battle plans. Families were divided overnight. Brothers fought brothers. Communities collapsed under the weight of loyalty and fear. This was not a distant war fought on foreign soil. It happened in towns, on farms, along roads people used every day. Civilians were not spectators. They were surrounded by it. At first, the war was not openly framed as a fight to end slavery. It was framed as a fight to preserve the Union. That distinction matters. Many in the North opposed slavery, but not all believed in full equality. Many simply feared the collapse of the nation itself. For enslaved people, however, the meaning was unmistakable. As armies moved, thousands fled plantations, risking everything for a chance at freedom. They did not wait to be freed. They freed themselves. This reality forced the nation to confront what the war truly meant. When Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, it did not instantly free all enslaved people, but it changed the war forever. The conflict was no longer just about unity. It became a moral struggle. Enslaved men joined the Union Army. They fought for a country that had not yet fully accepted them. Their contribution was decisive. More than 180,000 black soldiers served. Despite discrimination, unequal pay, and brutal conditions, they fought anyway. Because freedom was no longer theoretical. It was personal. The Civil War remains the deadliest conflict in American history. Over 600,000 lives were lost. Cities were destroyed. Economies collapsed. An entire generation was scarred. When the fighting finally ended, the nation stood exhausted, but changed. Slavery was abolished. The Union survived. But the hardest chapter was still ahead. Reconstruction was America's chance to rebuild. Not just physically, but morally. New constitutional amendments promised sweeping change. Slavery was outlawed, citizenship was defined, voting rights were expanded. For the first time, formerly enslaved people participated in democracy. Black schools were built. Black businesses opened. Black lawmakers were elected. It was one of the most radical periods in American history, and it terrified those who had once held unquestioned power. Reconstruction faced violent opposition almost immediately. New organizations emerged, dedicated to restoring the old order. Laws were technically changed, but daily life was shaped by intimidation, violence, and exclusion. Federal protection weakened. Political will faded. The nation grew tired. And when commitment disappeared, so did enforcement. By the late 1870s, Reconstruction was effectively over. Federal troops withdrew from the South. Promises made were quietly abandoned. What followed was not a return to slavery, but the creation of a new system. Segregation became law. Voting rights were suppressed. Economic dependence replaced chains. The system had changed its shape, not its purpose. This chapter is often rushed in textbooks, but its consequences lasted generations. As the wounds of war slowly healed, America transformed again. This time, not through expansion, but through industry. Factories replaced farms. Machines replaced manual labor. Cities grew faster than infrastructure could handle. The United States entered the industrial age. Railroads connected coastlines. Steel reshaped skylines. Electricity changed daily life. America was becoming a global economic power. But progress came at a cost. Industrial America celebrated success stories. Men who rose from nothing to wealth became legends. But behind every fortune was unseen labor. Immigrants worked brutal hours for little pay. Children labored in dangerous conditions. Workers faced injury, poverty, and death without protection. Opportunity existed, but not equally. The American dream was real for some, and unreachable for others. Millions arrived from Europe, Asia, and beyond. They came seeking stability, safety, a future. They built railroads, worked factories, cleaned streets, raised cities. They also faced suspicion, discrimination, and exclusion. America needed their labor, but questioned their belonging. This tension shaped national identity. Who counted as American? Who deserved opportunity? The answers were never simple. As inequality grew, so did resistance. Workers organized. Strikes erupted. Demands for fairness intensified. The response was often force. Protests were broken. Leaders were arrested. Violence followed. America was industrializing, but democracy lagged behind. The nation faced a new question. Could freedom survive unchecked capitalism? By the end of the 19th century, America's power was undeniable. Its economy was strong. Its influence expanding. Its confidence growing. But its contradictions remained. Wealth concentrated at the top. Voices were marginalized. Promises were unevenly kept. The nation had survived war, but it had not resolved its deepest struggles. As the 19th century ended, the United States stood transformed. It was no longer a fragile experiment clinging to survival. It was no longer a divided nation fighting for unity. America entered the 20th century with confidence. Its economy was expanding. Its cities were rising. Its influence was spreading beyond its borders. For the first time, the United States was not just shaping itself. It was beginning to shape the world. But the forces that had defined its past had not disappeared. They had evolved. For much of its early history, America avoided foreign entanglements. The focus was inward. Expansion, settlement, survival, unity. But industrial strength changed that. Factories needed resources. Businesses needed markets. Political leaders saw opportunity. America began to look outward, toward oceans it once feared. Territories were acquired. Influence expanded. Military presence increased. This shift marked a turning point. The United States was becoming an empire, even if it never liked that word. Unlike older empires, America rose quickly. It gained power faster than it gained wisdom. Decisions were often driven by economic interest, wrapped in language of freedom and protection. The same logic once used to justify westward expansion was now applied overseas. The belief remained that American systems were superior and should be extended, even without consent. History was repeating itself on a larger stage. While America projected power abroad, deep struggles continued at home. Industrial growth had created immense wealth, but it had also created sharp inequality. A small elite controlled vast resources. Millions lived one paycheck away from collapse. Urban life was crowded. Housing was unsafe. Healthcare was limited. For many Americans, progress felt distant. The question returned again. Who benefits from growth? In response, reform movements rose. Journalists exposed corruption. Activists demanded accountability. Workers pushed for safer conditions and fair wages. Change came slowly, and often reluctantly. Every gain required pressure. Every reform faced resistance. Progress in America was never given freely. It was demanded. Despite constitutional promises, many Americans were still excluded from full participation. Voting rights were restricted. Segregation was enforced. Women were denied political power. The ideals of democracy existed, but access to them was uneven. And yet, resistance persisted. Communities organized. Voices rose. Movements formed. History was being shaped from below. Global conflicts forced America to define itself again. Wars demanded unity, sacrifice, purpose. They expanded government power and reshaped national identity. America emerged stronger, but also more complex. Victory brought confidence. Loss brought doubt. Each conflict left unanswered questions. What is America's role in the world? And at what cost? As the nation grew, it simplified its story. Textbooks focused on triumph. Speeches emphasized unity. Contradictions were softened, not erased, just quieted. This wasn't always malicious. Nations need stories to survive. But simplified stories can become dangerous when they replace truth. Some stories challenge pride. Others disrupt comfort. They force difficult conversations about power, inequality, responsibility. So they were sidelined. Not because they were unimportant, but because they were inconvenient. The result was a partial memory. And a partial memory leads to misunderstanding. When history is incomplete, patterns repeat. Economic inequality resurfaces. Social divisions deepen. Trust erodes. Debates we think are new are often echoes of the past. The same questions return. Who belongs? Who decides? Who benefits? Without understanding history, the present feels chaotic. With it, patterns become visible. The untold truth is this: America is not finished. It is still negotiating its identity, still redefining its values, still wrestling with contradictions. That is not failure. That is the reality of a nation built on ideals larger than its actions. Progress has never been linear. Justice has never been automatic. Every generation chooses whether to repeat history or learn from it. Understanding America's full history does not erase its achievements. It deepens them. It reminds us that progress was fought for, that rights were demanded, that change was resisted, and still achieved. It honors those whose contributions were overlooked. It explains why struggles persist. It gives context to conflict. History is not about guilt. It's about clarity. America was not built in a straight line. It grew through hope and contradiction, vision and compromise, courage and fear. Its strength has always come from the tension between what it is and what it claims to be. That tension is not weakness. It is the engine of change. If this untold history gave you perspective, share it with someone who believes truth matters more than comfort. Subscribe for more history explained clearly. One century, one story, one lesson at a time. Because history doesn't just explain the past. It explains the world we're living in right now. Thanks for watching.